whoa. Before you leave and click off of the video, there's going to be a few storms that are going to be moving on through much of the United States. It's going to create a lot of severe weather, but more importantly, it's going to create a lot of significant winter weather. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time for February 16th, 2025. Now, I appreciate everyone who tuned in to the live stream last night. We talked about all sorts of significant impacts, such as flooding, tornadoes, high wind across the board. So I appreciate you guys for sticking around and, of course, paying attention to this video as well. We have our convective outlook here, which talks about whether or not there could be severe thunderstorms or even thunderstorms in general in the United States. This is what it looks like here for today. There's not really a whole lot there in general. Tomorrow, Monday, there isn't really a whole lot either. But on Tuesday, there is the chance for some thunderstorms to start to develop over here along the coastal areas of Texas and Louisiana. That'll probably continue to be the case all the way through from Tuesday into Wednesday, so do not be surprised if the Big Bend of Florida and the western panhandle of Florida, as well as portions of southern Georgia and southern Alabama, could get in the risk. So definitely something to watch out for if you're over in those areas. Now, of course, we're going to start out with a general picture here of how things should look like for the next 7 to 10 days, if you will. We'll start with the Euro model. Usually we only use the Euro model in the beginning like this, but we're going to add the GFS because there's something really interesting that's going to be happening over the mid parts of next week. Right now, we have the residual effects of our storm that's going to continue to move on through the northeast. A lot of heavy snow, some freezing rain into portions of New England as well. Even a lot of heavy snow into portions of Ontario and Quebec. So definitely something to note as that moves on through. And then our next storm system, as we continue to progress into the overnight hours tonight, is already moving on through into the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. So that'll continue to bring a lot of heavy rain across the coastal areas over there, and a lot of snow in the areas of the higher elevations and even areas that are further east into portions of the central United States. You can kind of already see now in the time period in between Tuesday and Wednesday, we have some winter weather that's going to start to develop over here in the Central Plains into the Ozarks. We're talking a lot of snow over here in the portions of Kansas, Missouri, northern Arkansas, and in the portions of Oklahoma. Some freezing rain is also possible across some of the areas over there as well. And then here's your severe weather risk that's going to be continuing to move on through into the overnight hours of Tuesday into Wednesday, to where that'll continue to march on through into areas over in the mid-Atlantic. Now, interesting thing to note here with this is that as we continue to get from Wednesday into Thursday, this system right here, depending upon how strong this is, and another system that we'll mention here in a bit, it will fully determine as to how strong and how much snow or how much activity you could be getting with this storm. So definitely something to note. We also have our next storm after that for the Pacific Northwest that's going to be moving ashore over there as well. But really, that just kind of ends up being more of a wave-by-wave type threat, to where you guys are probably going to start getting into your real rainy season here relatively soon. Your nor'easter continues to move off further and further towards the north and east. A lot of residual snow across some of the areas over there, but a lot of the heavy snow is actually off the coast according to this model, and really it's just a major snow threat for much of the mid-Atlantic, so something to watch out for with that as well. Then after that, our next storm, which is basically the residual effects of what was up here in the Pacific Northwest, kind of somehow manages to get all the way down over here into the Gulf. Kind of crazy, right? But that's actually sometimes what happens when storms lose out steam over portions of the Rocky Mountains. It kind of ends up just meandering instead of really doing a whole lot. And that ends up kind of just doing stuff eventually as we head over into the end of next week. We also have some more moisture that's going to be heading over into the Pacific Northwest. We're talking Saturday into Sunday around the 23rd and the 24th. We'll pull up the GFS here real quickly to kind of see if this counteracts or if this actually agrees with a lot of the stuff. You can see as we head over from Tuesday into Wednesday, similar setup as to what's going on. A lot of heavy snow that's in some of the areas that we've talked about. We got some of our heavy rain as well. We have our next system that's going to be moving off into the Pacific Northwest, but this is where things start to get a little wonky. Once you head into Wednesday night into Thursday morning, this system looks a little different compared to what the Euro model says. This is the GFS, the American model, and that is mainly because this system as a whole, as well as the other system that is aloft in the atmosphere, isn't exactly as strong in regards to our pressure gradients and our winds. So it becomes a little bit more discombobulated, And some areas kind of see the effects of that. Some areas don't see as much cold air that gets that far down south, and so the rain actually ends up going a little bit further north. So it's fully dependent upon how strong some of these storms are as this continues to move on through. But regardless, there's going to be a lot of moisture. There's going to be a lot of precipitation that's going to fall that will eventually melt into water. Some areas have had detrimental flooding over the past couple of days. Unfortunately, within this next system, it doesn't look like you guys are really going to get that much of a break. There's still maybe about a half an inch of rain, maybe even a full inch of rain is possible in some of those areas. But once again, if you still see any flooded roadways, turn around, don't drown, don't drive into them because they can appear a lot shallower than they actually are. A lot of rain that's going to be over here in the Gulf Coast, and then a lot of rain over here in the Pacific Northwest. Not as much as the previous system, I will admit. That is the good news with that. One thing I also want to mention here, our next system that moves off into the Gulf Coast, it can have some localized areas of rain, but I want to pay attention to this Pacific Northwest up here towards the end of next week. We have a pretty strong signal that an atmospheric river is probably going to move on through sometime from Saturday into Monday. We're talking 22nd, 23rd, 24th. Sometime around then, you guys could probably see a substantial amount of rain. So watch out for the potential of some flooding up there in the near future. Now, what we're going to be talking about here pretty much is something really interesting. We're going to be looking at the relative vorticity in the atmosphere, which is basically a good telltale sign as to where things can have momentum, where things can spin, where there is vorticity. And so we'll take a look at the Euro model first. The Euro model, as we get into Monday, tomorrow, into Tuesday, we start to see our next system that moves through the Pacific Northwest create this little bit of a trough. It's kind of flat at the moment, but it will eventually start to get its character as it continues to move eastward. We also have kind of this sideways trough too. And this leftover of our vorticity axis from our previous storm is going to also generate a new low pressure system, a new area of vorticity that will kind of sit over portions of the upper Midwest into the northern plains. And so as this continues to move on through, you can kind of see that we have our new trough that begins to develop right in here, our new area of vorticity that also exists over into portions of Minnesota. That's not really going to do a whole lot, but notice how this starts to develop, this starts to get a bit stronger, and this down here starts to get a bit stronger too. We move off into Wednesday and into Thursday. Notice how they get very close to each other. There's our one system that's going to be our aforementioned nor'easter. There's the other system. It starts to really race after the other, and they do the tango. I mean, that's the best way I can put it for you guys. That's what these low pressure systems do when they get close to each other. They see each other, they think it's a match made in heaven, and they start doing the tango. That's the basic way I can put it for you. And so depending upon how close they are, how much of an emotional attachment, I mean, I understand that Valentine's Day occurred just a couple of days ago, but depending upon the emotional attachment can actually fully determine as to what you guys could be seeing over here along the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. So as that continues to move on through, then you finally start to see that general system really move off, and there is your new system. I did say that it kind of just meanders and does stuff. That'll continue to be the case. It'll meander and move on through all the way into the Gulf Coast before, once again, our next system and atmospheric river moves off into the Pacific Northwest. But let's take a look at what the GFS says. GFS is a little bit different. Once again, you still see our trough, but our trough comes in a little bit weaker. We don't have as many oranges and yellows that form in a giant line. And that's pretty different. That's pretty different already right off the bat. And our trough that's up here into portions of the border of Canada and the United States is also pretty different. That's a little bit stronger as well. But the thing about that is that doesn't really develop into an upper air disturbance until a little bit later. We're talking about Wednesday night when the storms are already starting to move up the coast. It's still there, and that low pressure system kind of just lags behind. It doesn't really want to do the tango, and in fact, it just kind of slings it away from it. It's almost kind of like a slingshot to where it takes this low pressure system and it pushes it out a little bit further away from it. Compared to if it was a little bit stronger, if both the systems were a little bit stronger, I should say, you would have it really gravitate towards each other and you would start to see a little bit better mixing. And the reason why I say that is because our mixing is very important when it comes to storms like this. When we have storms that do the tango, if you will, they can really bring in a lot of stuff together. Here's our upper air disturbance over here. You can barely tell what it is, but it's basically surrounded by these blue isobars, just like this. And you can tell that this is pretty well defined because of how stacked these isobars are, and you can even see that is the case. This is going to start to get pretty strong too with how stacked these isobars are. So what that does is, because these are relatively close together and because these are stronger on the models, this is going to bring a lot more cold air down and into this general area that is going to try and basically make this a little bit more of a prolific event and a little bit more further south that people can usually see your winter weather activities. Because of that, you see a lot of freezing rain over here in the portions of North Carolina. You see a lot of snow over here into portions of the Delmarva Peninsula and even down into areas in southern Virginia and northern North Carolina. So definitely something to watch out with that. You can still see there's going to still be a lot of residual snow that's going to move up the coast, mainly areas over here in New Jersey, Long Island, and areas just off the coast, if not on the coast of New England. Could probably see some of the stuff. Same thing with Cape Cod as well before this finally starts to exit at some point here on Friday morning. GFS, however, we take a look back at this, you can see similar, stuff that we've seen before, but it's kind of flat. It's all over the place. Not really as well defined with this particular storm, and because of that, you can see how kind of far apart this is until we get back over here, back over in Missouri. But that's a big difference compared to what it was over here. And so because of that, the cold air doesn't really come in, it doesn't mix within the environment, and the storm goes a little bit further north. Some areas could see freezing rain that was expected to see snow. Some areas could see snow that they weren't expected to see anything at all. And so it's just really dependent on that. And then the other thing to note is that because this system is a lot weaker and it doesn't want to do the tango, it doesn't curl as close to the coastline as it does here in this model. And so that's definitely something to note here as well. It really depends upon how strong this storm is and how strong this upper air disturbance is and whether or not they simply want to do the tango. Regardless of that, there is a very good chance that we could be seeing some heavy amounts of snow here soon. As this storm starts to build up, you'll start to see snow that go across portions of the northern plains into the central plains. We're probably talking about around 3 to 6 inches over there. This is where things start to get really interesting as you head into Kansas and Missouri. We're talking Tuesday into Wednesday night, where we could potentially see almost up to a foot of snow, maybe even more than a foot of snow in some localized areas over here. We're talking southwestern Missouri and northern Arkansas, as well as northeastern Oklahoma and southeastern Kansas as the primary areas. And as this continues to move on through, some of these areas that have been seeing some really heavy flooding is going to see some snow. How crazy is that? One day you have severe weather, the next day you have winter weather, and it's just kind of where we're at right now in February as to how things can kind of change. And then, as you can see, things start to kind of pick up a little bit. You're along the coastline. Things are a little bit more diagonal, if you will. And so some of these areas could be seeing some heavy snowfall. I'll tell you what, areas near Norfolk all the way up into the Delmarva Peninsula, even over into Atlantic City, it's going to be seeing a good amount of snow here. So definitely something to watch out for with that. And even some residual amounts of snow is possible over here along Cape Cod and even into portions of Long Island. GFS, however, it kind of still paints that general picture as well. Once again, residual snow is going to occur over here in the Northeast as well as Ontario and Quebec. A lot of snow still expected for you all, but this is going to continue to move on through, and the GFS actually shows heavier amounts of snow over here in the portions of Missouri. This is actually almost 2 feet of snow here. We're talking 22 inches of snowfall possible with that, and that'll continue to move on through, but notice how flat this is. See how flat this trajectory of the heaviest amount of snow is? That's the difference here within this storm. That's the big question mark that we still have, and that's why this storm is definitely going to be something that we're going to watch over the next few days. We also have the threat for freezing rain. Freezing rain, we mentioned, is possible over here in portions of Oklahoma and Arkansas, as well as in the areas over here in Mississippi and Louisiana, but significant amounts of freezing rain is also possible over here in the areas near North Carolina, and I wouldn't be surprised if the GFS is correct and it does shift off a little bit further north. Areas near Norfolk could potentially see some significant amounts of freezing rain as well, so please keep in mind and watch out for the potential of some heavy amounts of frozen precipitation over the next few days. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family on social media. Also, follow me on social media. Link will be in the description down below. I will catch you guys tomorrow at 8 p.m. with a new forecast, so stay tuned to the channel. I really do appreciate you guys as always, and I will catch you guys next time. Stay safe, everyone.